I am Isabel Hartman, 36 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the one who solves problems quietly, the one who mediates, the one who carries the weight no one else wants. Sunday lunch had the same stale rhythm it always did. My parents, Robert and Linda Hartman, sat at the table, chatting as if their lives were perfect. Tessa, my younger sister, lounged like a queen on the sofa, scrolling through her phone while her husband, Dan, tried to keep a casual smile. Uncle Ron was already halfway through a story that no one was listening to, except perhaps the dog. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to melt into the background. It was what I did best. Then came the text. Expect a call from my lawyer. Christmas is off. It was from my father. His tone was clipped, formal, the kind of voice he used when he wanted to make me feel small. I didn't argue. I didn't call back. I simply texted, understood. Later, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened my laptop. 30 minutes later, my name was off the $320,000 mortgage. Just like that, the house that had always been their safety net was no longer my problem. 48 hours later, the storm arrived. 67 missed calls, texts, voicemails. Robert, Linda, Tessa, even their lawyer begging for answers. We need to talk. This is a misunderstanding, my father's voice pleaded over voicemail. I almost laughed. Upset? After everything? It had all started 3 weeks ago at a dinner I hadn't wanted to attend. My mother, without even looking up from her phone, said, Isabel, we can't afford to take you on the trip this year. The cabin is small, barely enough room. Small, barely enough room. I frowned. A cabin? I had spent years paying their bills, covering Tessa's mounting credit card debt, sending money to help with utilities, and now I wasn't even considered. Robert smirked. Don't be dramatic. If you're worried, maybe send us a little extra this month. The words hit like knives. I had already covered the mortgage, the utilities, even Tessa's car payments. And yet, I was dramatic for finally voicing my frustration. I forced a bitter laugh. Sure, have fun. That was when I realized the truth. My family didn't need me because they loved me. They needed me as a safety net, as a wallet with a face. I had been invisible, taken for granted, while their smiles and social media posts made it all look like a perfect family. The next week, I discovered a Facebook photo. Robert, Linda, and Tessa at the luxury cabin, all smiles without me. A text from my father. Hey, can you send another $200? Running low on cash. I stared at it, then typed, Sorry, can't help. Enjoy your family trip. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of liberation. I had finally realized standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The silence after my refusal to help them was intoxicating. For a full week, no calls, no messages, just peace. But peace, as I quickly learned, was temporary. On a cold Tuesday evening, while preparing a late dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another Facebook post. Linda's status. Sometimes even the ones you love turn on you. We gave everything, but some people only know how to hurt. And there it was, Tessa's comment. We did everything for her. She just threw it all away. My blood ran cold. Everything for me? I remembered the nights I stayed up helping Tessa pay off debts she swore she couldn't handle. I remembered the thousands I'd wired to cover their bills, only to see them post smiling family photos that conveniently excluded me. I scrolled past the endless notifications and paused at the screenshots I had taken months ago, proof of every time I had bailed them out financially. Every transaction, every desperate text from Tessa, every excuse they spun. I had been a silent provider, invisible and unappreciated until now. That night, I gathered the evidence. Bank transfers, mortgage documents, texts, even audio recordings of my father berating me on Thanksgiving. By midnight, I had a neatly organized folder. This wasn't just about money, it was about exposing the truth. The next morning, I made the call that would change everything. Yes, I need to remove myself as a co-signer on the mortgage, immediately. The woman on the other end hesitated. I didn't care. The decision was final. 2 days later, the storm erupted. My phone exploded with calls from Robert, Linda, and Tessa. Voicemails pleaded, screamed, begged. Isabel, what did you do? We can't afford this. You can't just... I sipped my coffee calmly. Not my problem. Their desperation was almost entertaining. For years, they had assumed I would always be the enabler, the one who fixed everything. but now I had changed the rules. A week later, I decided to clear my head at a small, quiet cafe. That's when I saw it. Tessa's newest post, full of anger and sympathy from distant relatives and friends. We raised her, gave her everything, and this is how she repays us. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already made my choice. Sometimes family isn't about love or loyalty, it's about control. And I was done being controlled. It was then that I posted my folder of evidence publicly. Screenshots, documents, messages, all proof of their manipulations, their lies, their constant exploitation. Within minutes, the reactions began to shift. Friends and extended family who had only heard one side began questioning the narrative. Tessa's response came first. Wow, Isabel, seriously? Doing this publicly? Pathetic. Linda followed. I don't even know who you are anymore. I didn't reply. I simply watched as the truth dismantled the illusion of our perfect family. The clinking of cutlery had slowed. Conversation died somewhere between Tessa's laughter and my father's cough. Something in the air had shifted, like the room itself had realized this lunch wasn't just another Sunday. Dan cleared his throat. So, we actually have some news. My mother straightened, excitement flashing in her eyes. Oh, don't tell me. Tessa grinned, reaching for Dan's hand. We're engaged. Applause. Cheers. My mother half screamed in delight. Even Uncle Ron slapped Dan's back so hard his wine nearly spilled. And me? I smiled. Perfectly. Automatically. But inside, a part of me, the part that had spent years cleaning up Tessa's messes, covering her impulsive choices, began to ache. Because just last week I'd seen the messages, Dan and S, a woman who wasn't my sister. I stared down at my plate, fork hovering above the roast chicken. My father's voice echoed in the background. You two are perfect for each other. Perfect, right. I forced myself to look at Tessa. She was glowing, practically vibrating with joy. And for a moment, guilt flickered through me. Guilt for knowing something she didn't. Linda, Mom, turned to me, eyes bright. Isabel, aren't you happy for your sister? I blinked, snapping out of it. Of course. I'm thrilled. My voice sounded far away, polite, like it belonged to someone else. Dan met my eyes across the table. His smile faltered for just a second, enough for me to see the fear beneath it. Later, when everyone was celebrating with champagne, I stepped into the kitchen under the pretense of grabbing more glasses. The moment I was alone, I pulled out my phone. The message thread was still there. S. You can't keep pretending forever. Dan. Just until after Sunday. Sunday. Today. My chest tightened. Isabel? Tessa's voice came from the doorway. What are you doing? I slipped my phone into my pocket and turned, forcing a smile. Just cleaning up. You know Mom hates a messy counter. She laughed, crossing over to hug me. You're the best, you know that? I don't know what I'd do without you. Her words hit harder than they should have, because if she knew the truth, if she knew what I knew, she'd never say that again. As she walked away, humming softly, I stared at the sink. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like a stranger. The organized one, the fixer, the one who knew too much and said nothing. But not for long. Tomorrow I'd decide what kind of sister I really was, and whether the truth deserved to be told or buried forever. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet for what had just happened. Mom and Dad had gone to bed after another round of champagne toasts, and Tessa was curled up on the couch in the living room, scrolling through engagement ring ideas. I lingered in the hallway, half hidden in the shadows, watching her. The glow from her phone lit up her face, soft, trusting, unguarded. How do you tell someone that the man who just promised them forever was already lying? I went back to my room and closed the door softly behind me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message. Unknown number. You shouldn't get involved, Isabel. I froze. My heartbeat had stuttered. Then I looked closer. It wasn't an unknown number. It was Dan's. A chill slid down my spine. I typed back before I could think. Me. Maybe you should stop texting people who aren't your fiancé. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Dan, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Me. Then what is it? Because it looks exactly like what I think. Silence. I locked my phone and threw it onto the bed. My mind was racing. I'd kept my distance, stayed quiet, but now Dan knew I knew, and that changed everything. Downstairs, I heard the creak of the front door opening. I peeked through the window. Dan was outside, pacing in the yard, phone pressed to his ear. He looked furious, desperate. A car pulled up a few minutes later. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, wearing a navy coat. I recognized her instantly. Samantha, a coworker from his office, the one who'd left those late-night comments on his post that Tessa brushed off as just work friends. They started arguing, voices sharp and muffled through the glass. Samantha shoved something into Dan's hand, a small white envelope, then stormed off into the night. Dan stood there motionless. Then he tore the envelope open, read whatever was inside, and cursed under his breath. When he came back in, he didn't see me watching from the top of the stairs. His jaw was tight, his eyes hollow. He went straight into the guest room, not Tessa's. That was the moment I knew. Whatever secret he was keeping, it wasn't just infidelity. It was something worse, something that could shatter my sister's life completely. I should have gone to Tessa right then, but instead I whispered to myself, tomorrow. I'll tell her tomorrow. Only tomorrow never came the way I expected. Morning light spilled across the Hartman kitchen, soft and golden, the kind of light that made everything look almost normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Tessa hummed to herself as she made coffee, her engagement ring catching the light like a tiny spotlight on a lie. Dan wasn't there. He'd left early for a work meeting. I knew that was a lie, too. The envelope Samantha had given him last night haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was inside? Why he'd looked so panicked? Why she'd been crying when she left? When Tessa went upstairs to shower, I slipped into the guest room. Dan's laptop was on the desk, lid half closed. I hesitated, my heart pounding, then opened it. It wasn't locked. On the desktop, a folder was open. Inside were scanned documents, legal ones. I clicked the first file, a loan agreement. Robert Hartman's signature, my father's. My blood ran cold. The next document, a transfer authorization. The recipient's name, Daniel Carter. Tens of thousands of dollars. I scrolled faster. There were messages attached. Dan and my father discussing payments, timing, and something about keeping Linda out of it. It wasn't an affair. It was blackmail. Dan was blackmailing my father. Isabel? I jumped. Dan stood at the doorway, silent, expression unreadable. He looked exhausted and dangerous. I closed the laptop slowly. You should lock your computer. He stepped closer. You shouldn't be in here. You shouldn't be in my family's business. He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. You don't understand. Your father owed me. I was just... Owed you? I snapped. He's my father. What could he possibly owe you? Dan hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. He wasn't lying. He was hiding. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Your father isn't the man you think he is. Ask him where the money came from. Ask him why he can't sleep at night. Don't you dare twist this, I said, shaking. You're manipulating him, and Tessa, for whatever you want. Dan stared at me for a long time, his eyes filled with something like pity. Then he whispered, You think I'm the only one lying. The sound of footsteps in the hall broke the silence. Tessa's voice called, Izzy? Dan? What's going on? I turned, but when I looked back, Dan was gone. The window was half open, curtains swaying gently in the wind. And on the desk where the laptop had been lay the white envelope. I reached for it with trembling hands and tore it open. Inside were photos, old, faded. My father, younger, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, a woman holding a baby. On the back of one photo, written in my father's handwriting, For Isabel, one day, she deserves the truth. My vision blurred, my throat closed. The baby in the photo, the tiny wrapped newborn, had a hospital tag. Hartman, female, 1989, my birth year. But the mother wasn't my mother. The photo trembled in my hand. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The kitchen buzzed faintly downstairs, the clatter of pans, my mother humming to herself. But it felt like another world. I stared at the woman in the picture again. Her eyes were the same shade of gray as mine. Her smile, faint, unsure. And the baby she held, wrapped in a pink hospital blanket, had a tag that read, Hartman, female, 1989. Me. But Linda Hartman wasn't in the photo. She wasn't there at all. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. Now you understand why your father paid me to stay quiet. I froze. Dan. I typed with shaking hands. Me. What are you talking about? The 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, Dan. Ask your father who that woman is. He lied to all of you, and I was the one cleaning up his mess. The world tilted. I went downstairs. My father sat at the table, reading the newspaper, glasses low on his nose, Everything about him looked ordinary, familiar, but now I couldn't tell if that familiarity was built on truth or performance. "Dad," I said quietly. He looked up. "Morning, Izzy. Coffee?" I placed the photo on the table in front of him. The color drained from his face. He didn't speak, didn't even blink. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the photo, then stopped halfway. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low, dangerous in its calm. "Dan had it," I said. "He said you paid him to stay quiet." My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on?" "Maybe you should tell her," I said coldly, looking between them. "Tell her who this woman is." My father closed his eyes, long and slow. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Her name was Margaret. She was—" He hesitated, the word catching in his throat. "Your mother." The room fell silent. Linda's towel dropped to the floor. "Robert, what are you—" He turned to her. "I told you we couldn't hide it forever." The air left my lungs. "What are you talking about?" Linda's voice cracked. "You were adopted, Isabel, but we promised each other. We promised. We'd never tell you unless we had to." I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. "So all this time, I wasn't your daughter?" Tears welled in Linda's eyes. "You are my daughter. I raised you. I loved you. But you lied to me!" The walls seemed to close in. All the family dinners, the laughter, the birthdays, all of it built on a secret no one thought I'd ever find. And Dan knew. That's why he was blackmailing my father. "You let him use this," I said through gritted teeth. "You let a stranger hold this over us. Over me. Because you were too afraid to tell the truth." My father whispered, "It wasn't supposed to come out like this." I took a step toward him. Then how was it supposed to come out? No one answered. Outside, a car door slammed. Tessa returning from errands, cheerful, humming. And I realized something that twisted my stomach into knots. If I wasn't their biological daughter, then Tessa wasn't my sister. By the time evening came, the Hartman house no longer felt like home. The smell of lemon and rosemary roast chicken still lingered, but it only made me sick now. Tessa set the table as if nothing had happened, chatting about wedding venues. Mom tried to smile, her hands trembling slightly. Dad sat stiffly, silent. And I was waiting, because I'd asked Dan to come. He arrived just before sunset. Pressed shirt, careful smile, eyes scanning the room like a man walking into a trap. Tessa ran to him, kissing his cheek. "You're just in time, love." He nodded, his gaze flicking to me. "Always." We all sat. The knives and forks gleamed like a warning. I didn't wait for small talk. I reached into my bag and laid the photo on the table, the one of my biological mother holding me. The sound of Tessa's breath catching cut through the silence. "What is this?" she asked. "Ask Dan," I said softly. "He seems to know everything." Dan's jaw tightened. "Isabel." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to talk your way out of this. You blackmailed my father with something you had no right to touch." Tessa looked between us, her face pale. "Dan, what's she talking about?" Dan exhaled. "Your father came to me 2 years ago. He needed money, quietly. He didn't want your mother to know why." Dad's voice was gravel. "You said you'd keep it buried." Tessa's voice cracked. "Keep what buried?" Dan looked right at me then. "Your father wasn't just paying me to stay silent about your adoption, Isabel. He was paying me because I found out who else was connected to it." I frowned. "Who else?" Dan's gaze shifted to my mother. "Linda." The room went still. Mom's lips parted. "That's not—" He interrupted gently. "You knew Margaret, didn't you?" Tears pooled in Linda's eyes. She nodded. "She was my best friend. She got pregnant, and she couldn't keep the baby. She asked me to take you, and I did." "So you both lied," I said quietly. "It was supposed to protect you," she whispered. "From what? The truth?" Tessa stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "So, wait, Izzy's not—" "Don't say it," I warned, my voice low. But she did. "Not really my sister?" The words hit harder than I expected. Dan muttered, "That's why I wanted out. I didn't want to marry into a lie." Tessa turned on him, eyes blazing. "You coward!" He flinched, but didn't argue. "You deserve to know who you're marrying." Tessa grabbed her ring and threw it across the table. "Then here's your answer." It clattered to the floor, rolling to a stop beside my foot. Dan left without another word. The front door slammed. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at the photo again, at the woman who had given me life, and the 2 people who had built one for me out of lies. Finally, I looked up at Linda and Robert Hartman, the only parents I'd ever known. "I can forgive you," I said quietly, "but not tonight." Then I turned and walked out, the echo of my steps following me down the hallway. Outside, the night was cold, but for the first time, it felt honest. And somewhere deep down, I realized this wasn't the end of my family story. It was the beginning of mine.